Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. About a year and a half ago, I started a fairly long-term project, building out a world I refer to as Nerona, for the purposes of eventually writing a series of fantasy stories set there, which I refer to as the Blacklight Chronicles. Now, as of this recording, I haven't actually finished even outlining any of those stories. I have a lot of character sketches, and I have some very short pitches for stories that I want to put in that series, but for the most part, I have been writing short stories that build out that world, that give me a sense of who all the characters are, who all the players are, what the lore of the land is, and what the situation of people outside of the narrative are. There's a bunch of reasons why I'm going to all of this time and effort in building this world, not the least of which is to try and make it feel lived in and cohesive, as opposed to just sort of made up on the fly. The protagonist of the Blacklight Chronicles travels a great deal. He gets entangled in a lot of very complicated political situations. The setting of Nerona is essentially based on Italy in the mid to late Renaissance, specifically around the era of the Borgias. In fact, there is a family of Borgias in Nerona that is a major faction in part of the nation of Nerona. And I wanted to capture a sense of the small, disconnected communities, each with their own heroes and villains, politicians and religious figures, all knit together by a series of mercenaries and warlords and small petty crooks, with a certain layer of fantasy dangers such as the fair folk and dragons thrown in on top. Now, in writing a series of short stories to build out a world, I'm doing much the same thing that I did when I started on the Roy Harper adventures. The Columbian West was a world that already existed when I created Roy Harper to help me explore it and flesh it out. The difference is, there is no one protagonist to all of these Nerona short stories. The purpose is more to build out a rogues gallery of characters that can come and go over the course of the various adventures I intend to write, that will have a pre-existing sense of who they are, what their goals are, how they interact with the various power centers in the world. The very first Nerona short story I wrote is called The Lady of Marble, and I actually wrote it in response to a prompt from Iron Age Media. If you're not familiar with the website or their prompt system, the quick summary is every week there is a visual prompt offered, and you try and come up with a story to match it. Now, when The Watchtower, which was the prompt I was responding to, came out, I had already been toying around with some of the characters I wanted to write short stories about, and I knew that the first story I wanted to write took place in the mountains. Adding in the idea of the Watchtower as presented in that Iron Age Media prompt gave me enough to throw together a good story, which I submitted and was fortunate enough to receive an editorial spotlight. Not bad for my first outing with the world. Since then, I have found several opportunities to write short stories in response to prompts that explore different parts of the Neronan world that I find very interesting. Pewter and Iron, for example, looks at the life cycle of the Neronan dragon, and also introduces Fabian Sensate, a very bitter, cynical old man who will be, let's just say, recurring troublemaker as he pursues his own agendas and vendettas. Caesar's Company, one of the most famous groups of mercenaries, or condottieri as they're known in Nerona, have made appearances in two of the short stories, Woman on Fire and The Rival. These mercenaries, along with the famous Blackleg Company, form the backbone of several stories I want to tell that deal with the larger scale military situation between the major Neronan cities. But I'm really not quite ready to get there yet. In the meantime, I've had a lot of fun exploring the abilities and dispositions of Caesar Shieldbreaker's two top lieutenants, Nero 9 Lives and Tiberius Twice. And yes, all the members of Caesar's Company are going to be named after Roman emperors, if you were wondering. I've actually struggled with whether or not I should have a short story or two devoted to the Blacklight himself. The first Blacklight story, Andre Blacklight in the Beacon's Dark, is an origin story, And I really don't want to do too much with the character before I tell how he began. If you do that, and then go back to tell his origin, it can feel anticlimactic, so I'm currently leaning towards avoiding that. I'm not sure how long it will take me to get to a point where I'm ready to write that story, but in the meantime, exploring Nerona in this manner has been a lot of fun, and I have an opportunity now to share a part of that story with you in a new and unique way. The man who owns Iron Age Media has recently started publishing a magazine where he collects short stories and comics and publishes them on a quarterly basis, more or less. The current issue is entering its period of funding, and it features a story by yours truly. So if you're interested in watching a world come together in bits and pieces, there is at least one piece you'll only be able to get by checking out Anvil Magazine. Go and give it a look and support it if you're so inclined. I'll be continuing to mention it at the end of my videos for the period of funding. But perhaps you're wondering what kind of story you'll get if you support. Well, I can't speak for all of them, but I can tell you that the Shadowed Canal tells the story of the people of Citadel Fione who are menaced by strange shadows lurking in one of their famous canals. The famed bravos Aelfred and Gwendolyn, sometimes called the Heracleans, are hired to find the source of the shadows and get rid of it. However, the problem calling itself the Dark Lord Saffron is not easily solved with sinew and axe. The Heracleans will have to take a step back, discover the root cause, and do their best to ensure that it never troubles Fione again. But first, they'll have to get free from the Dark Lord's shadow. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, go and give Anvil Magazine a look and consider supporting it, either digitally or in print. I would be very grateful, and I'm sure Richard would as well. In the meantime, let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.